All right, we'll go ahead and call to order our IVDA meeting for, what is today, January the 9th? And I'm going to ask to see if there's any closed session for public comment. Seeing none, we're going to go ahead and recess in closed session, and by the time we get back, we'll probably have a few more people joining us. Thank you. We'll do it on the way.
Because they're not here.
Yeah. Okay, coming back to open session, we'll go ahead and do a roll call first.
Please state your name for the record. Members from the City of Colton.
Jack Woods, Mayor Pro Tem.
Isaac Suchel.
Thank you. From the City of Loma Linda.
Dusty Rigsby.
And Ovi Popescu.
Thank you. And from the City of San Bernardino.
Jim Mulvihill.
Thank you.
And we go to any reportable action from closed session.
We do not have any reportable action.
Okay. Having said that, we'll go ahead and we'll have Mayor Rigsby lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any items to be added or deleted?
No items, sir.
Okay. And any conflicts of interest of anybody to disclose? Seeing none, we'll move on to informational items. Mr. Burrows.
So this is no secret to this body, but with the recent elections, we do have a couple of vacancies, and those have yet to be filled, being that this is an appointed board. But for the record, as far as officers are concerned, as to IVDA, the only vacant officer seat presently is the vice chair. So staff's recommendation is, as the new appointments get resolved, that the election of officers be deferred to a future meeting, which I wouldn't think you would have any objection to. But I've got a few questions about which office is which, so I just wanted to make sure it's only one on IVDA, and we're tracking that for you. We do want to start the year off, though, with an update on your airport. And as you probably know by now, airports are required to report their operational stats to the FAA every January. So we've just literally tallied the tally, and I'd like Mr. Gibbs to walk through how it looks. So, Mark, if you would.
Thank you, Mike. So to Mike's point, these are largely numbers that are submitted to the FAA by airports across the country, and these are also the full year operational results for the airport. And those are primarily split up into two different categories. Of course, it's the airport that submits it to the FAA rather than Luxair, but the increases in activity cut across both of these departments, if you will. So the first is the overall number of aircraft that utilize the airport. We've been on a strong growth trend since at least 2014. It's kind of interesting. If you look at the overall number of 58,439 operations, that's an increase over last year's record. And since 2014, the airport has experienced an average growth rate of 19% per year. So these are broken down into categories so you can see where that growth is taking place. Although it's a small increase in the overall number of operations, the trend continues, but what's really interesting is that trend is transitioning toward larger aircraft. And this is a perfect example of that. So we've had a lot more large commercial aircraft using the airport. That's primarily due to increases in air cargo activity. If you look at the fourth quarter of this last year, we had up to 11 flights a day of aircraft that included Boeing 757s, MD-11s, 747s, Antonov AN-124s, very large aircraft utilizing the airport. So the other trend that continues to skew toward larger aircraft are what are called air taxis. That's how the control tower defines them. Think of them as corporate aircraft. There's been a much more activity, and that continued into 2018, which was our record year at nearly 5,000 aircraft operations of the corporate variety of aircraft. But one of the significant thresholds that was crossed this year is our success in air cargo, which has grown dramatically. 2017 was a record year. It was about 3 times the year before. And then in 2018, things got busy. One of the very interesting pieces of this is that we crossed an important threshold for the FAA. So 100 million pounds of air cargo landed weight, we now enter into a threshold for additional grant dollars. In the past, we've generally been allocated discretionary grant funds, but now we've moved into the threshold of entitlement grant funds, which is an important threshold.
And
Yes.
what's the amount that we would possibly be generating for some of these grants?
I'm sorry, one more time?
What would be the amount that we could possibly generate from some of these grants?
So it's an interesting formula that the FAA uses, but you have to cross the 100 million pound threshold before you are eligible for entitlement funds for cargo activity. So to put that in perspective, last year we were 129th busiest airport for air cargo. Based on the numbers from this year, we should be around 100, and we should be right around the 100th busiest airport. So if you take a piece of the pie, there is a percentage of the total grant dollars allocated to aviation around the country, to airports around the country, and a percentage of that goes to cargo, and it's all based on the amount of activity for each airport. So we should be in the top 100. I suspect that'll be about an additional $250,000 a year, which we can put to good use for infrastructure improvements. As you go up the ladder, regardless of where your ranking is at, it's really based on that volume. So the greater your volume, the larger percentage of those grant dollars you get.
So with the annual reports, we'll be able to see how the rest of the airports shake up, and probably by your Sabia meeting, we'd have a gauge on where we did settle in the final count.
One of the other segments of growth has been in international traffic, and this dates back to essentially 2012. And each year, if you go back to 2014 as a starting point, we've been growing 73% each year on average. Exceeded 200 flights we exceeded 200 international flights this past year for the first time. So Luxair has also been experiencing increases in air traffic, particularly large aircraft. And you can see there was a 27% increase in the amount of aircraft utilizing Luxair this last year. So the graph before you, the orange, is the current year. It's 2018, or excuse me, the most previous year, which is 2018. And the blue line is the same time period in 2017. And this is really the interesting part. So we saw an overall increase in activity at the airport with 58,000 total operations. But it was really upgauging the aircraft that were flying here. So we saw a 28% decrease in general aviation aircraft utilizing the airport. So the amount of growth has really skewed toward larger aircraft. As you can see, a 28% decrease in small aircraft, yet we've grown overall, and the majority of those increases have taken place in corporate and commercial-sized aircraft. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, but that concludes my report.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our regular consent agenda. Do I see a motion?
approval?
Second.
Hearing a first and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Moving on to items number 7, we're going to go on to Mr. Harris, who's going to talk to us about a U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration grant project.
Thank you. We were fortunate enough to receive a grant from the federal government to do road rehab and expansion just north of the airport on 5th Street, 3rd Street, and Central, and a little bit of Church Street. What the general work is, the scope of the work is, we're going to expand the roadways to their ultimate width. We will be performing road rehab itself or replacement, lights, new street lights, curb gutter sidewalks. We're going to expand the intersections at Palm and 3rd and 5th. We are going to extend down 5th Street to the 210 freeway, where we are going to expand the amount of lanes from 4 to 8, or 6 to 8 underneath the freeway, new on-ramps to the freeway. We're going to modify 3rd Street where it meets 5th Street. We're going to open that back up again to make it a dedicated right to the freeway. So the general goal is to provide more access to the north end of the airport and surrounding areas to enhance and attract new companies to the area. The schedule of the work, the grant allows us 5 years to finish the work, which should be plenty. And at the currently, we have, the City of Highland has a design company on tap to do the design work. They have awarded the contract, but because of delays of getting approvals through the EDA, they're on hold right now until the mess in Washington cleans up. So we're on hold right now, but we do have enough time in the grant to be able to easily finish the work in the time frame that they've allotted. The total cost of the project is a little over $7 million. The matching share for the 3 agencies, the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, the City of Highland, and the IVDA, each shares $4,093,000. We did, the City of Highland did receive a substantial grant through the SB1 California funds. So that has reduced the amount of our costs by about $677,000. The work is allowed to take 3 years to finish. I can't see it taking that long. That's a long time to impede road traffic, so I'm sure that we're going to be getting that work done in a much friendlier time frame. So that's where we are today, and if there's any questions.
So since we're not the primary driver of it, pretty much everything's happening in the City of Highland, and you'll just notify us from time to time as to where they're at with the process?
We get regular updates from the City of Highland on the progress of the design. We participate in reviewing designs and participate in their normal design meetings.
So then, on a quarterly basis, you'll then update us to where they're at with the project,
Yes.
basically? Okay.
And that we wanted to clarify because we've had a lot of 3rd and 5ths on this dais over the years, and I wanted to make sure that you had the update on this particular grant, the folks that are involved, and the fact that this is a corridor, particularly with our Eastgate project, that the timing of the improvements is very important.
Okay.
So if you hear of a 3rd and 5th project, we wanted to make sure you had the latest information. And we're not awarding the contracts here at this dais, but we're definitely involved in the implementation of the project.
Thank you. This is just to discuss. And
Yes, it's just an
Okay.
update. Yep.
All right, moving on to item number 8. we're going to authorize the reimbursement to the City of Highland for the Sterling Avenue improvements in an amount of not to exceed $41,405.94. Mr. Burrows.
So normally, we wouldn't have a $41,000 item on your open discussion, but I wanted to make sure you had the facts behind this. Recently, we did compete with the City of Highland on a state grant for Cal Recycle. This is rubberized asphalt rebate funding. And the City of Highlands had a good run with this. We had originally intended on our IVDA project to use a new Sterling intersection that we had designed as our main project to contribute to the project pool for a couple of reasons, one of which the ability to possibly get a separate grant for that project. The timing of the improvement did not meet the schedule of this grant. So the City of Highland had a resurfacing project that they were working on with the City of San Bernardino, just north of 6th Street, and we agreed that that made some sense to replace in the project list. Cal Recycle does allow you to amend your project list, even though there are time parameters on the spending of the money. Highland was able to meet the timing of that, and Cal Recycle says, yes, it is an eligible project. So the net effect of it is we would have still had a $40,000 reimbursement, but I want to make sure you all knew that we recommended swapping out the two projects to ensure we complied with the terms of the grant, but also kept options open. Federal EDA, prior to the shutdown, did invite us to submit a new grant application as IVDA for what will be the Sterling Avenue project, and that would be to upgrade Sterling Avenue from the intersection of 6th Street back down into 3rd Street with a new connection, a new access through that signal directly into our airport fuel farm. That's something Mr. Harris has had in design and pre-designed for some time, and EDA looked very favorably on that to fund in this next cycle. And so Ms. Beltran and Mr. Harris are working on that application as we speak. So if it pleases the board, we would like to pay the City of Highland their appropriate share and close out this state grant.
So if I understand correctly, it's something that we need to because it's part of the existing agreement we have with them, or we're doing it out of the goodness of our heart? Okay.
No. This was our obligation under the grant. The dollar amount was there, but what we did need to do to meet the time parameters is allow Highland to use a different segment of the Sterling Road to meet the obligation.
Okay. Any questions? Go ahead, Mr.
Comment. That's obviously the east side of Sterling, which is that's been worked on. Is that correct?
Both sides of the street. So this also, for the San Bernardino folks, means that the City of San Bernardino has $40,000 more that they don't have to pay the City of Highland because we had this grant.
Okay, but we didn't just do half the street.
No, they did
Because that
the
has
full-
happened,
Yeah,
throughout
they did
time.
the full street section.
So we did the whole thing, and we couldn't get them to go ahead and go clear on up to the 210.
It's part of the,
No, there wasn't enough grant for that, unfortunately.
Thank you.
all righty.
I move it.
Okay, we have a motion to move
I'll move it.
and a second from Mr. Woods. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, it passes unanimously. Moving on to item number 9, our last item, Mr. Burrows.
So this is an updated action plan where we are in the month of January, Happy New Year, putting the finishing touches on the new Tippecanoe Access Road, and then bracing for the start of Mountain View Phase 4 construction. That's the interchange improvements with the city of Loma Linda. Mr. Garay, in another week, will be in front of your countywide oversight board getting your next ROPS reviewed. So congratulations, Bill. And that puts us in track to file the annual ROPS by the February 1st deadline. Right now, we are kicking the year off closing out projects and then getting ready to start a few new ones. But got a bit to do here in the next couple of months, but everything out of the gate seems to be on track. So that's where we sit.
Where are we at with the rest of the Tippecanoe widening project and,
So Tippecanoe widening, our obligations for Tippecanoe were completed.
I'm sorry,
when
wrong
we
street.
did the
I
matching
meant to
funds.
say Mountain View.
Mountain View.
Sorry.
Mountain View Phase 2 is the
Yeah.
biggie. That's the
Yeah.
Mission Creek.
Yes.
And Mr. Harris and I were just talking about that yesterday, actually.
Okay.
So we have our project manager working on all of the final permits. We've had to re-permit the thing now a third time in coordination now with the Redlands Rail Project.
Correct.
The critical piece is Mission Creek. We've got to replace that bridge. The Army Corps permits are all being updated right now. That was a big critical path issue. That's going very well. They're allowing us to actually amend the prior permit, which is what we wanted. The utility relocations are the challenge. So we have Southern California Gas, we have Verizon, we have a couple of water lines, and the city of Loma Linda and some communications line in there. Yeah, Jarb knows about it. So all of that coordination is underway, as is getting the right-of-way. So the temporary construction easements and the easements for the road widening to the west of the project are all coming in as we speak. All bracing for hopefully a summer start of construction.
That was my next
Now,
question.
that's,
Okay.
right now, we've got a couple more utilities to get through to get that date, but that is the push, and that is really what we are all driving for, so that there's not an adverse impact to Redlands Light Rail, because we got to work around all their crossings, as you all do in your communities. So we have probably another update coming, either at your next meeting or the meeting after, to give you the final project schedule, but those are the moving parts. So we didn't forget about it.
Thank you. I think that concludes our meeting. Any other comments or questions from the board? We are then adjourned until our next scheduled meeting, which would be February the 13th, if my records are correct.
Yes.
Correct, okay. Thank you. Good evening.